we can hear you.
Sounds good. So thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you everyone for joining online. This is our annual meeting to discuss service changes planned to be implemented in June. Everything we're discussing today is proposed and we are seeking feedback for the next 4 weeks. So we'll address that in the meeting. But I just want to be clear up front on what we're discussing here today. So as mentioned, this is a public open house. Oh, pretty good. So in order to increase access to the information, we've got this posted in various sources. This video will be posted online early next week, and the slides are already posted on the meeting website. So if you have any questions or you need to review, feel free to reach out to that survey comments email. Feel free to rewatch this presentation. We're happy to answer any questions. And then we will post the final changes at the end of April based on feedback. So we'll go through there again. Daryl, is there anything we wanted to mention with regard to online comments right now?
They can't hear me.
So for those of you that are online and you want to ask any type of question, there is a Q&A. Just enter it into the Q&A and we'll enter it into the queue and address it live. Those questions that we don't address live, they'll be addressed within the chat. And if you have something to say, you could always raise your hand at the appropriate time, and we could allow you to unmute for you to ask your particular question. But that's about it.
All right. And sorry, we skipped the introductions. That was Daryl Leitner, manager of outreach and strategic communications. I'm AJ Jordan, director of planning. When you email us that survey comment, that comes to both of us, and we definitely want to hear all feedback from everybody. So again, I mentioned we've got a long agenda. We're going over the process, what areas we're focusing on through the annual service planning, and then specific topics and areas that we're addressing, and then a Q&A at the end. So we'll pause between each section to see if there's any clarifying questions, but in order to make sure we keep this moving, any comments we would love to stay after as long as you need at the end to address them. And then you can also feel free again to send those comments in any of the formats that you see fit. So we just want to talk about the Your Voice initiative. This is an initiative that LANTA started, Daryl's department started about 4 years ago to make sure that we're hearing everyone's input for all of our service changes. What the Your Voice initiative essentially is making sure that however you communicate with us, if it's through social media, if it's by talking to an operator on the street, if it's by reaching out to us via email, if you just run up to me on the street and share something, we want to make sure that all of those communications are equally and equitably understood and received on our end and distributed back to you, so that you don't feel like, oh, I didn't communicate this information the right way, we didn't hear it. We want to make sure that we're receiving all that information as much as possible. Part of that Your Voice initiative is the annual service plan. The annual service plan basically reorganized our service change schedule so that there's one major service change a year. So previously, before we started this about 4 years ago, there were 3 service changes a year. We made schedule changes at those service changes. And one of the issues with that is it often led to routes changing in the middle of winter. And so someone would lose their bus stop in a cold weather and not know anything. It also led to frequent changes so that people couldn't plan their housing or their jobs around it. I'm a bus rider too. I know how important these bus stops are. So that's why we are pursuing one service change a year as part of the annual survey process. So in fall, we do an annual survey. In winter, we assess all of those. In the spring, we have these public meetings to address what we've heard, and then we implement in summer, and then review that every year. So that also provides 2 clear periods for rider feedback. That is the annual survey in fall and the annual meeting where we're here right now. One of the consequences of that is without the 3 service changes every year, one service change into a much larger service change. And so that's why you see these larger changes happening, but less frequently than the smaller changes in before. So addressing changes, why are changes happening again? Well, I'm going to start with that second bullet point, public requests. We know the service isn't perfect. And so we receive lots of feedback every year about things that we can improve. And part of what we do in planning is we assess whether those changes will benefit more people than they might detract from, because there's a lot of good ideas and we could move a bus route someplace, but we know that removing that route from somewhere else negatively impacts people. So we always need to make sure we're balancing our service changes, and we continue to receive requests. So that's where a major component of the other areas we're talking about tonight are. Back to that bullet point one, which I know a lot of people are concerned about, is changes in Whitehall. We announced late last fall, actually, we announced in October, but really there was a larger media awareness in January that Whitehall Mall asked, or I'm sorry, not Whitehall Mall, Lehigh Valley Mall asked us to remove the transit center from the property. But that is not the only change in Whitehall. Whitehall Mall asked us to leave last year. Whitehall School District actually asked for us to have service on their property. We've also noticed a change in shopping habits and where people are going in Whitehall. US 22 and MacArthur have become increasingly more congested in the US 22 area. And we noticed that because of that increased traffic between 22 and Allentown, that access to the apartment complexes in the lower part of Whitehall was becoming more difficult to walk out to those bus stops on MacArthur. So there's a lot of changes in Whitehall that led to a need to look more into it. So we'll get into some of those changes in a bit. And then last is budget constraints. So the proposed changes here do represent a 4% service reduction. We're starting to make adjustments in service level to position LANTA to be able to address different funding scenarios in the future. It is possible that additional service reductions could happen in future fiscal years, but this year we were able to contain it to about a 4% reduction. So that's just important to note that as we move forward with funding, LANTA is on a fixed funding, and so we have to navigate that funding appropriately. So those are the main changes. As with all those changes, LANTA's planning department is consistently working to make sure changes impact riders as little as possible. So we're trying to mitigate the change, but make sure that we're addressing as many riders as possible. And the best way we can do that is communication with you. So thank you everyone who has submitted feedback. Please continue to submit feedback. The more feedback we get, the better we can make these service changes. So there are really 6 areas that we're focusing on today. The Whitehall Allentown Comprehensive Service Reorganization. That's kind of what we addressed. It's more than just the Lehigh Valley Mall. Everything touching the Lehigh Valley Mall had to be looked at and reassessed. We also have some relatively minor changes in Fountain Hill and Bethlehem. West Valley service adjustments kind of addresses some of the discrepancies in service over in the Briningsville, Fogartsville, Trexlertown area. And then Easton area changes that address some changing needs in the Easton area. The last 2, EBS station naming and signage. We'll get into that, but now that a lot of us are aware of the 2 EBS lines, we are making some capital improvements at top. So we want to address station names based on feedback we've heard. And then lastly is wayfinding and service delivery simplification. So we'll go over that. It's just some changes to the system map, timetables, head signs, apps to make it a little easier to understand the changes we're talking about. So I'm actually going to start with those latter ones because I think understanding the system map will help explain the areas below. So we're going to jump right into those service delivery changes. Service delivery, this might seem wonky, but LANTA is detangling service delivery from service types. So previously we had 100 level routes, 200 level routes, 300 level routes, and they were understood that 100 level routes generally operate all day, every day, 7 days a week, late into the evenings. Urban routes, the 200s generally operated Monday through Saturday and generally ended after 6 p.m., stuff like that. So we had the coupling of those service types with service delivery, and it prevented us from making some changes that we really wanted to see. For example, one area that we know has been an issue is access to Crest Plaza over on the west side of Allentown. We had to remove 107 service from Crest Plaza. 209 service still goes there, but we couldn't expand the 209 service into evenings and Sunday service like we wanted to because of this. So that's really the only internal, we adjusted our internal policies to allow that to happen moving forward. And now the route numbers can operate service whenever they need to operate service. So I think that's an important change. There are still some background things with those numbers. It does affect stop placement, alignment design, and ADA service delivery, but at least we're no longer constrained into those service hours, and we can really adjust the routes to meet the needs. In addition to that, we've got system map changes. So because The blue lines on the map previously were the 100 level service that were understood to be 7-day-a-week service. We're no longer only coloring the 100 level routes dark blue. Instead, we're coloring every route that operates 7 days a week dark blue. So it's going to look similar, but for example, I mentioned the 209. 209 now has 7-day-a-week service. Even though it's a 200 level route, it's going to be shaded with dark blue on the map where it operates 7 days a week, and then purple in that area out to L-C where it still only operates 6 days a week. So there's just some slight changes to understand that on the map. Again, the yellow service is Monday through Friday service. Pink is the flex zones, the curb to curb reservation based service. And then red is fare free service. Currently there's only one fare free route. It's right out front here, Route 601. Thanks again to the Bethlehem Parking Authority and City of Bethlehem for sponsoring that fare free service. But we're hoping to see more of that. So we've designated that on the map. And then lastly, we've added destinations to the map. So if you look on the head sign, we'll go to the next slide, but you have your destination on the head sign. We're adding those words to the map so that you can correlate what you're seeing on the bus with what you're seeing on a map. That'll make a little more sense on the next page. So here, the destination sign changes. So we mentioned, we added the destination to the map. Here you can see in the map in the center. Where's this arrow? So in the map in the center here, we've got Village West over on the west. 107 to Village West, that correlates to 107 Village West on the head sign. In Google, in the Google apps and Google Maps, we've got 107 to Village West. In the timetables, we've got 107 to Village West, and in Transit app, we've got 107 to Village West. What that means is we're moving away from the eastbound, westbound, northbound, southbound designations because we found that those have been confusing to certain people. We'll also see that in the back end. Some of our operators are here today. We'll still reference those directions in the back end. But for public understanding of where a route goes, we have found, based on feedback, that it's easier to have all of the words be the same and point to that word. Even if it doesn't necessarily represent some of the important destinations on the route, it does represent the same thing on all of the apps and timetables that we're looking at. Then we've got EBS station name changes. So a lot of you might have noticed that we installed some temporary signs in the Bethlehem area. That was part of a pilot project that started last August. We put up 14 different types of signs at EBS stations, and we really wanted to test out what worked best. We learned some things. They're actually all installed differently. Some of them have local LANTA stops nearby. Some of them have LANTA stops on them. Some of them are share the channel. Some of them are different. We have learned quite a bit from that. But in the future, we are moving to add some capital improvements to those enhanced bus stops. So we call them stations, and there's usually 2 platforms at each of the station. We're going to be making formal signs at all the EBS stations, and we wanted to make sure that we got feedback from the public. So if you haven't provided feedback on those signs yet, they're coming down soon. You got 4 weeks to give feedback. We also have heard that some of the station names are a bit confusing. Good example right here, Faybridge North and South. We heard from a lot of people, man, it's confusing to take the westbound bus from the south side at Faybridge South Station to the north side. So here are the current proposed name changes. Faybridge South is being changed to Riverport. Faybridge North is changed to Bethlehem City Hall. That's the one right here. Allentown Fairgrounds just as Fairgrounds. West Cassville is changing to Hamilton Crossing. Trexlertown Transit Center is Commercial Center, which is the name of the street and the complex there. And Trexlertown Plaza is changing to Trexlertown. That's in response to people were confused over which Trexlertown was which. So that's that change. Lehigh Valley Mall discontinued. We will discuss that in a minute. But there are 4 additional new stops in the Whitehall area: Grape, Schott, Whitehall Shopping Center, and MacArthur. So as we go through the presentation, look through those names. If there's any other names that you would like to see changed, please let us know, because we are going to put these on more fixed permanent signs at these locations. And so we want to make sure that they're all understandable and easy to read for everybody. There's a lot that we're going to be discussing that's changing. So for anyone that's nervous, here's what's not changing. These routes have no schedule or alignment changes. 105, 107, 220, 324, 402, 410, 413, 422, 423, 431, 441, 501, 502, 506, 605, 606, 701, 702, 703, 751, 752, and 753. So if you're concerned about any of those routes, there are currently no proposed changes to any of those routes. Just wanted to address that for anyone who might be concerned. All right, next we're jumping into the Whitehall analysis. Before we jump into that, are there any clarifying questions? Any of that information confusing? Anybody need some clarification on any of those? Yeah.
What's direct service versus locals?
So that is so the trunk routes, the 100s, tend to stay on main streets more than circle into parking lots. It's really just a difference of how much tolerance we can have for the bus leaving the street and going to a parking lot, because some of those routes, when you go into a parking lot, it takes extra time. So it's really just determining how much we encourage direct services more on street, local services serving those parking lots more. Thanks. Any other quick questions on service delivery? So we'll jump into Whitehall. I know that's a big topic here. Yep.
A question to ask, can you repeat it?
Oh, sure. So for those online, that last question was, what is the difference between direct and local service? That was in reference to this slide where we changed trunk routes to direct service as needed and local service as needed for urban routes. Right. Then we'll jump right into Whitehall analysis. All right, this is a big topic. So as many of you are aware, Lehigh Valley Mall did ask us to leave the property last year. That led to a lot of conversations, and we're going to address some of those here. But it also led to us really taking a look at Lehigh Valley Mall Transit Center and seeing if it's still accomplishing the goals it has been in the last few years, because we have just generally noticed changes in shopping habits in Whitehall pre to post COVID. And so we just wanted to really dig into that data. One of the earliest things we did when we were talking to Lehigh Valley Mall about this is we looked at all of our major transit centers and transfer hubs. So on the right is a list of all 52 major transfer points in the region. And we looked at fall 2019 numbers to fall 2024 numbers, which is really Q1 of 20 and 25. So a 5-year window to see the average daily ridership at each of those transfer points and what's seen the highest growth in 5 years and what's seen the highest decline in 5 years. Looking at the data at the top and bottom in the middle, we see that the highest growth has been Easton. The Easton Transit Center has more than doubled in service. It's been really great to see. It's led to some capacity issues that we had to address, but Easton is now the 3rd largest transit center in the region. At the very bottom of that list is the Lehigh Valley Mall. So Lehigh Valley Mall is seeing half the ridership it did in 2019 based on fall numbers. And so that is a dramatic drop that we can't just ignore. But that said, it's still the 4th largest transit hub in the region. So we noticed that still a lot of riderships daily, still very important, but things have changed. Also on that list, 4th from the top is Whitehall Central Walmart, the area north of Schott. That is now the 5th largest transit hub in the region and has seen almost double the growth in the last 5 years. So this cursory analysis, this upfront analysis, told us that we had to look more into Lehigh Valley Mall. And, you know, throughout this whole process, we've been talking to them all and to Whitehall to make sure that they understand how important ridership is there. That bottom number is still a huge number, 4th largest in the region. It's still an important destination. And so just to be clear with everybody, the Lehigh Valley Mall Transit Center is still planned to close, but we have come to an agreement with the mall to maintain a bus stop on property, which just means the transfer activity from there. And I'll go into why in a second here. Based on that cursory analysis, we knew we needed to hear from riders. And so in January, we did the Lehigh Valley Mall Transit Survey, and we got 1,634 responses, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for all of the really good feedback. It told us a lot. And so we really appreciate all of that. Helped us understand a lot of what's happening. In those responses, we had 84% of those respondents say that the mall is their destination, and 16% say they were transferring at the mall. But one thing that we noticed in the data is there are some places like down here, people said that the mall was their destination, but Walmart was the store that was their destination. So one of the things we took away from that is there might have been some confusion over which mall we're talking about, or that we're talking about removing service to the entire Whitehall area. It's very clear that Whitehall is an important destination still, and we need to really understand where people are going in Whitehall to make sure that we're getting people where they want to go. So digging a little more, we analyzed that data and every survey response with their origin zip code and destination. We grouped the stores into areas in Whitehall to really see where people are going. And over on the right, so we've got our major stops on the right, but in the top right, you see that Lehigh Valley Mall was 46% of the responses. So huge number, still the largest share of responses, but less than half of the responses were Lehigh Valley Mall directly. 33% were Lehigh Valley Mall are out parcels. So we got a lot of like Michael's or Dave & Buster's, which are closer to the streets and not necessarily close to the mall transit hub. So that was just something to be aware of. Of those, you'll notice these numbers don't add up to 100. So of those out parcels, 21% of all responses are along Grape Street. So we got a lot of responses for, you know, the Mission Barbecues, again, the Michaels along Grape Street. And then 12% were MacArthur. So that's Best Buy, Burger King, you know, all of those destinations on MacArthur. 15% were north of Schott, and that's the Whitehall Central area we're talking about. So the Walmart, Aldi, Giant, 15% of responses, 16% rounded up were there. Schott to Mickley, which is really Whitehall Square area. That includes Taco Bell, McDonald's, and everything in Whitehall Square. That was 4% of responses, 4.4%. And then we did get 1.2% responses south of 22. Most of those were Jordan Parkway, Home Depot, stuff like that. So the responses were all in the area, but you can kind of see here, Lehigh Valley Mall is still very large, but was not overwhelming the place. And we saw a large share of people going somewhere else, north of the mall, outside the mall. So our key takeaways from that is that Whitehall remains a primary destination for the region. No question about that. Transfer activity has shifted away from Lehigh Valley Mall. What we find is that there's a lot of people transferring at Lehigh Valley Mall, trying to go somewhere else, and those transfers are actually taking more time. So everyone trying to go from Allentown to Walmart, there's a lot of people that just want to get there directly and go faster. And so that's one of the things that we want to address in here. Every time you go around that mall, we all know, we've been on that bus, it takes 7 minutes to go around that mall. And then when you add a transfer, it takes even more time. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those speeds and getting people where they want to go faster. Primary destinations are dispersed across Whitehall. Mall is still very important. Lehigh Valley Mall, excuse me, is still very important, but other destinations of Whitehall are also important. And the area north of Schott has seen the largest growth. We want to make sure to address that. Our responses and planning, I just mentioned that we needed to diversify the options in Whitehall, give different routes going different places to help people get where they're trying to go without forcing that transfer activity. We also wanted to speed up services to certain areas like the Walmart I just mentioned. And then continue to coordinate. So we mentioned conversations with the mall and with Whitehall. Whitehall and the Whitehall Copley School District have been very gracious in working with us on finding solutions. They've offered locations for newer transfer points, new end-of-line destinations, and also Lehigh Valley Mall. I don't recognize that accessing the mall is still very important. We've addressed some of their concerns, and a lot of their concerns were related to the large buses end of line in that parking lot. So they recognize that access to the mall is important. Main concern was all of the buses parked there, taking up a lot of space, layovers there. And so that's where we've kind of navigated moving forward. We continue those conversations, and I'll mention where we're going in a second. Like I've mentioned kind of a few times here, we need to extend and connect the routes from Lehigh Valley Mall. So instead of forcing that transfer for people not actually going to the mall, we want to make sure that you can get beyond the mall and where you're trying to go as quickly as possible. Follow-up steps we've taken is a driver needs assessment. One of the things we noted from speaking with our operators, as well as our union, I see some operators here, thank you for joining, is that the mall was not exactly the best place for an end-of-line layover. It wasn't great for restrooms. Our operators have a tough job and need a break at the end of the line, and they need a good place to have a break. So we spent a lot of time working with Whitehall to find new locations, and that's where Whitehall Copley School District really comes into play. Whitehall Copley, they have a giant complex north of all the shopping areas we're talking about, and Whitehall Library's there, Whitehall Zephyr Stadium's there. They offered 3 restroom locations for operators, plenty of space to lay over buses, and they want riders to go to the campus. They addressed their concerns are students from school staying at after-school activities, getting back down to Fullerton, or anyone from the Valley wanting to go to their arts complex and see the shows after school. So they were looking for those ends of lines, and it really was helpful. So you'll see that on the maps here. Whitehall Copley is a new end of line location, and I do really think that will help our operators quite a bit at the end of lines and maintain that stop on property while removing some of that that large bus in their parking lot activity from there. So I mentioned we have a temporary agreement with Lehigh Valley Mall. They have agreed to allow us to stay on their property if we remove all the layover activity, which still means we had to readjust all of the routes going to Lehigh Valley Mall, but we're able to maintain that current stop at the mall. So for this summer, the current Lehigh Valley Mall Transit Center stop will remain, but it will still be phased out as we talk with the mall on other stop locations on property. They're very interested in finding a new location. And we are actively discussing how important it is for that to be walkable to the stores, to be easily accessible from the streets. And we're having some really good conversations with the mall on that. Late breaking news actually just happened today. You'll see it in some of the maps. We just got access to St. Paul Street. For those who aren't familiar, there's a street kind of connecting Fullerton to Macy's along south of Grape Street that really helps get to the backside of the mall and saves a lot of time. So we will be using that street for some of our routes to help us get to the temporary stop and hopefully to a future improved stop at the mall in the future. So thank you to Whitehall Township for really working with residents and allowing that bus restriction. There was a restriction on that street. That restriction was lifted. So thank you to the township for that. And then of course we had to reschedule all of the routes affected in the Whitehall area. So the next steps, the final steps are presenting all those changes to you, receiving feedback and finalizing the changes. So we just want to be clear. This does affect a lot. You know, we know it's a huge change to remove a transfer center, change it to a stop, and reroute every route that affects them all. It's unfortunately something that had to be done and is still in process, but I do think there are a lot of good changes that have come out of this. So I'm excited to present those, and we definitely want to hear your feedback on that. And just a reminder that we are still working with the mall and the township to address these concerns and hopefully find a better location in the near future on property. So we're going to go into the 4 really service area changes. We'll start with the biggest and most complicated first. For all of these, we're going to show the system map of the area, then go through each route individually, just kind of showing the route, and then go back to this map to kind of help piece it all back together because it is a lot and can be a little overwhelming. So I mentioned everything that touched the mall had to be redesigned, which includes all of the Allentown routes and Southside Allentown. So it really had a cascading effect for everything that went through that Lehigh Valley Mall Transit Center. We'll kind of go through them from the bottom up, but we could go through some of the things you'll see in here. So there's new service to the Whitehall Copley School District. I mentioned new EBS Green Line stops, faster service to Whitehall Central, more frequent service on Grape Street and to MacArthur Town Center where Aldi is. And Route 101 is making a resurgence in the Southside Allentown and Southside Bethlehem areas to provide increased frequencies there. So I can't put it lightly. There's some large changes. We'll start with that 101 alignment. So this is a new route that generally follows what it was Route 103 along Susquehanna and Southside Bethlehem to Allentown, and then continuing over to Jefferson and Lehigh on the south side again. So it's really south side to south side to south side. All of the stops are existing, but this will really help increase access from south side, one part of south side to another part of south side, and all of downtown Allentown, which is seeing a lot of new venues and access there. One fun thing about this is it is increasing frequency. So this bus route will operate every 45 minutes during the day, same span as the old 103, 4:55 in the morning until about midnight. But in the midday on weekdays, it's going to be every 45 minutes, and then it's every 60 minutes at night. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, it's 9:30 a.m. to about 7 p.m. every 60 minutes. And I'm going to rush through these schedules. If anybody wants to stay after, we do have them printed out. They're online, and we'll answer any questions later. But you'll see on all of them, the eastbound, westbound direction has changed to 101 to Spillman, 101 to Parkway Shopping Center for those destinations. just to help understand. You'll be seeing those in the apps and on the timetables as well. If there's any of those destinations that are confusing, please reach out and suggest a better name. But we tried to make sure the destinations matched what is currently on head signs or what the public understands that destination to be. So just an FYI there. So yeah, increased frequency along Susquehanna and in Fountain Hill. As part of that, the 209 tail that was to Cumberland Gardens is being moved over to what was formerly Route 210. So 209 has seen some changes. We mentioned earlier that we needed to add night and Sunday service in the area to Crest Plaza. You might have noticed 103 has kind of gotten broken down into parts in order to address access needs from Northampton. So the area of 4th Street in Allentown is now connected to 209, and the south side tail to Jefferson and Lehigh is on 209. This really helps connect a lot of the areas that needed grocery access to the grocery stores at Supremo and the new grocery store at 14th and Allen, as well as Target and Weis Markets up at Crest Plaza. A lot to look at, but everything north of Crest Plaza up to L-Tri-C remains the same. It's really, there is now that new shorter one from Crest Plaza to Jefferson and Lehigh that operates on nights and on Sundays. So again here, it's really every 60 to 90 minutes. 90 minutes is only in the evenings. Every 60 minutes, 5:40 a.m. to midnight, weekdays and Saturdays. That is the schedule to L-Tri-C. And then at nights, when it becomes 90 minutes, it's just to Crest Plaza. And on Sundays, it's just to Crest Plaza, 8:30 a.m. to 7:40 p.m. Here's the Sunday schedule. And again, we're posting these times. Please review them. If there's any times that need to be adjusted slightly by a few minutes, please let us know. We've made every effort to maintain all the connections that previously existed, but please reach out if you see anything that might be off. We mentioned that tail that was formerly the southern end of 210 down 8th Street, Wyoming, and Jefferson was replaced by the 209. The 210 is relatively the same route with a couple adjustments. You can see the tail here now serves that same tail as the 101 alignment. We're seeing overcrowding on buses on 15th Street. There's quite a bit of ridership on 15th and Jefferson. And we're also seeing increased ridership along Hamilton Street and downtown. So that's why both 210 and 101 are using that area. Everything from Allentown up to the mall is generally the same, but again, that late breaking news, this is where you can see that St. Paul Street gets us to the mall faster instead of having to go up to 8th Grape Street. That's also a tight turn for buses, so we're excited to be able to use St. Paul. And then again, because we can't end a bus at the mall anymore, we extend the tail up to Whitehall Central. So the 210 will now go up to the Walmart up north of in the Whitehall area. We added one trip at the end of the day to help people access Whitehall at the end of their shifts, and then we added 2 trips, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, to come back from Whitehall to address some service needs there. So generally, same schedule as the current 210, every 60 minutes, 5:30 a.m. to 7:17 p.m., 7 o'clock p.m., weekdays and Saturdays. 211 alignment. This looks like a crazy map, but it's generally close to what we're talking about now. It is the current 211 with adjustments in quite a few places. So from Allentown, it still serves 7th and 8th Street to serve Supremo. It still goes up to Washington. But between Washington and Olympic Gardens, it is now taking 15th Street and goes down to Allen Street and then cuts back to Washington. This does a couple things. We've received some comments from operators that the 14th Street to Roth was a difficult turn. It was preventing a safety issue and difficult for a lot of drivers to make. We also received comments from riders that access to LA Fitness was important, as well as access to that new grocery store on 14th and Allen. This also provides a connection to Route 209 in that area, which is really great. And then, as I mentioned earlier, access to the apartment complexes to MacArthur was something that needed to be addressed. And because we couldn't go all the way around to the back of the mall, we're taking it down Fairmont to Fullerton. This allows people in all the apartment complexes there in Fairmont to access the bus to go directly to the mall without having to walk down to MacArthur. And it also takes us in that back side of the mall to actually save some time.
takes us back out, stays at Whitehall Square, goes up to Whitehall Central. But now it extends beyond Whitehall Central and Walmart up to the Whitehall Copley School District. And this is really where we're talking about that new school district area. So this is planned to end at Whitehall Zephyr Stadium, going past the Whitehall Library and going past Mechanicsville, which we received some comments. There's a Wawa and a McDonald's up there that a lot of people are hoping to access. So Route 211 now goes up to that area, serves those areas, and provides an end-to-line layover at Whitehall Zephyr Stadium. So we haven't gotten the green line yet, but a lot of this does feed into other services. So, someone might want to ride back and forth, but this also provides new connections to get to those main faster routes faster if you don't want to stay on the same bus, but you can ride this back and forth to connect to those areas. And so that schedule is 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. or really 10 p.m. weekdays and Saturdays. It's every 60 minutes during the day, but every 2 hours in the early morning, that first 2 trips, and at the end of the night, just to make sure that we're maintaining spans so that people can still get home from what they're trying to get home from. We want to make sure we align to that last trip south with a lot of store closures in the area so that employees can get back to the city. So that is the proposed schedule for 211. Again, back to the Whitehall Copley School District, the 325, no changes north of Whitehall Central. It's the exact same schedule, exact same route all the way up to Palmerton, serving Walnutport, Slatington. But because we couldn't go end at the mall anymore, we are connecting it with that green line if you want to get to the mall, and then terminating it at Whitehall Library. So it'll go past Whitehall Zephyr Stadium through the Copley School District, Whitehall Copley School District, and end at the Whitehall Library, which again is a destination that people ask for and also a nice layover location for operators. So we're excited to be able to provide that, but it does go to Whitehall Central before it goes to those areas. So you'll still be able to get everywhere you're trying to go on that route that you currently do. And I mentioned it's the exact same schedule as currently, same hours of the day, same days of the week. We've mentioned 103 quite a bit. This is a different change. The area in Caddy, North Caddy, Northampton Borough up to Cherryville, those all stay the same. Everything north of Whitehall Central, generally the same schedule, same span, same hours of the day. The southbound trip did shift slightly. I think it's 20 minutes later, but it's still the same span, just to make sure that there's enough layover again for operators to use the restroom at the end, but also to make sure that we aren't having that bus run delayed, so to provide some space there for the route to breathe. But this route serves all of that area in Northampton, Catasauqua, North Caddy, serves Whitehall Central Walmart for every trip, serves Whitehall Square for every trip, goes down Grape Street. Right now, it is not designed to go into the mall. It is designed on Grape Street. And again, that is in response to how we heard a lot of riders trying to go to places on Grape Street and not necessarily in the mall. So you still have 210 and 211 going into the mall. 103 is currently scheduled to be on Grape Street, but please provide feedback if you feel like those should switch a little. That's based on the feedback we saw when we did that origin destination. But like I mentioned, we now have access to St. Paul, so we can swing this into the mall if needed. It's just doing that would remove service from that area near Michael's that people requested service for. And then again, it extends east to Ray Street, FedEx Willowbrook, and the Lehigh Valley International Airport. So this provides new connections for River Central area, Northampton, Borough, Caddy, to get to the airport and to FedEx, which I know a lot of people live and work in that area, but right now they had to do quite a bit of transferring to that 319. So it maintains that service, maintains it hourly. Like I mentioned, it's the same general schedule as the current 103 in Northampton, 5 a.m. to about midnight every 60 minutes, weekdays and Saturdays. Yes, and Sundays. That scared me. I was like, no, we didn't cut Sunday service. 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every 2 hours on Sundays, which again is the current 103 schedule. 319 remains. 319 is entirely geared toward FedEx Willowbrook. This is what we call one of our revenue support routes. This route is funded by FedEx Willowbrook to access their job site. So while a lot of the service is being removed from 319 here and moved onto the 103 for regular service, this route is really designed for those specific shifts. So it's a much more limited schedule in the early morning, late evening. But we did add local stops on 6th and 7th Street, which was a frequent request for people on those early morning trips. They had to walk to one of the EBS stops or even to ATC to catch that bus. So there are local stops, but I mentioned it is a much more limited schedule. So it's select trips early in the morning, late at night, year around the shift change at FedEx Willowbrook. One of the things I'm going to mention at the end, and I'm going to mention it throughout this, but there's a slide there too. If any of these changes affect your access to jobs, please have your HR manager reach out to us through survey comments. And I'll put a slide at the end. We are able to make some accommodations for employers if we have an agreement with those employers. And this is one of those examples where FedEx had that midnight shift change and needed that service. We need to go through the HR manager to make sure that we're aligning your shift schedules to the bus routes. Because one of the issues we sometimes have is we'll design a bus route around a shift, a business will change that shift, and then suddenly there's a misalignment. So we really need an agreement with those employers to make sure that we're aligning the shift and the service. 319 is a perfect example. But as we go through here, if you're seeing anywhere that is removed, please talk to your HR manager, talk to your boss, and have them reach out, and we'll have a conversation to see what we can do. So I just want to mention that while we're talking 319. And then we've talked about it the whole time. The green line is really service backbone up to Whitehall. In talking about speeding up service to the Whitehall Central area, going around that mall, really, it took 7 minutes per trip and took a lot of time for people trying to go there. So this has always intended to be the rapid transit route. So it's no longer going to the mall and staying on MacArthur. This also aligns with the original service plan. If you go back and look at the EBS service documents, there are always plans for service along MacArthur. And so we're going straight at MacArthur to Whitehall Central and extending it beyond Whitehall Central back to MacArthur Town Center where the Aldi is. A lot of people liked going up there, and now it provides 30-minute service all day, every day, up to MacArthur Town Center again, as well as to the Giant in the area. So we're excited to provide that. There are new stops at Grape Street and at Schott. The Schott stop exists. We're just adding it to the green line. Grape Street is a new stop, and I want to point that out. These are on MacArthur at Grape Street. There, we know that street is difficult to cross, so please do not cross that street. We debated whether we should add those stops now. There's always been plans. We've been working with PennDOT and Whitehall to improve the street crossing. But in hearing that feedback of how many people are going to Burger King and Best Buy and areas on either side of those roads, we knew we needed to establish that now and just discourage anyone from crossing the street. So if you want to go back home, please make sure you ride the green line up to Whitehall Central or down to Jordan Parkway, cross the street safely and go back the other direction. That's part of why that bus operates frequently, but we just wanted to point that out. We are adding those stops in because it's an important access point for people. And we do have plans to improve those stops in the future. There are active plans with Whitehall Township. So that's the green line. A couple other things you might have noticed on the map. 603 is no longer on the map. 603 is being discontinued, but being replaced with 403. 403 is really geared towards school access service. That's what we were finding a lot of the ridership to be. And so 403 serves the former 603 from ATC, Allentown, past Allen High School to Jefferson and Lehigh, and then extending over to South Mountain Middle School, which is also, there's a grocery store down there too for an end of line. So this is much more limited service. One of the distinctions with 400s is they only operate on Allentown School District days. They're called capacity enhancers. They're really to handle rush crowds. And so they're put in place during those peak rushes. But just because they operate on school days doesn't mean you can't ride them. They are open to the general public. 400 routes are on all our apps and you can ride them. They just, we don't put them on the system maps because they don't operate on non-school days. So we just want people to be aware if that's there, it is open to the public, but it might not operate when school is out of session. So again, that's geared towards school hours, select trips in the weekdays, and I'd love to hear feedback from the public on trips here. Similarly, another 400 route, we're adding Route 409. This is really designed around Trexler Middle School, connecting Trexler Middle School area to 19th Street, Liberty Street, Allen, and Washington over to Jordan Heights. So it really ends at 4th and Washington. And again, this is only operating on school days in the afternoons to help relieve the overcrowding that we're seeing on the 211. So it's really designed to get school kids off of the other bus routes, but you can use this route if it comes by. So it's just something to be aware of. And that concludes the Whitehall Allentown area. So that was a lot. We've got 3 more service areas to discuss. The others aren't this complicated, so we're going to take a little break. But looking at this map again, you can see all the routes we just talked about and how they connect. So I wanted to take a quick break to see if there were any questions on that. Yeah. So at this time, we can't, because we have looked at which routes should go where and where they expend.
Question.
So the question, sorry, the question is whether the 101 can extend to Hellertown. One of the issues we have is, again, some of these routes get a little long and operators do need a break. So when the route gets too long, that's part of what the issue was on the 103. It was just too long. So we have looked at the 105 and now we've got the 103 connecting at the airport and seeing how those tails can switch. At this point, we decided against the 101 going to Hellertown. But if we receive a lot of comments like that, we can receive it. One thing I would address for those type of comments is where you're trying to come from and what you're trying, how the 101 would be different from the 105. Is it a frequency issue or is it accessing somewhere different, like accessing from Fountain Hill? So please provide those. We'll receive those comments here. But if anybody else wants to join in on that, please provide the why you're considering 105 to 101. But yeah, great suggestion. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people from Clubhouse to Lehigh County that have issues understanding the bus routes, no matter how you try to break it down. But yet, there's also a lot that if Clubhouse to Lehigh County, it's over by the 15th Street Wawa. Thereby, they know they can catch certain ones and walk up from Chew Street and on 15th and Chew. But at the same time, as you're stating, the nice little grocery store on 15th and Allen, that little strip mall. You got the 209 that goes there, the 603. But there's so many people that don't necessarily understand the routing. And somebody that did 6 years of school busing, and also happy to see one of your good drivers over there being Terry, because that young lady helped me with explaining certain routes, and also some of the other drivers you got here helping explain things. That's helping some of the people that have medical disabilities understand things better. And as a member, I like to thank you guys for having a language barrier translation guide with with your employees you have.
No, I appreciate that. And definitely for outreach, if there are any groups or any organizations that need some rider training, some understanding of how to use the routes, some language assistance, please reach out. Survey comments here, but also just to the general rider resources. We have a whole department that does a lot of those outreach events, and we'd love to hear from them. I do want to address, we have comment session at the end because we do have a full 40 minutes of stuff to talk about still.
I catch the 103 from the Wawa on Broadway there. Is there any mutation or alteration there?
So 103 on, I'm sorry, the Wawa in Fountain Hill.
Yes.
So that is the new 101. It's the same route from Southside Bethlehem to Allentown, same alignment. It's just an increase in service. So currently it's every hour. It's going up to every 45 minutes during the weekday, but same span. Yep. Any other clarifying questions? Yeah.
Okay, I noticed you have stops on MacArthur Road, and you said that PennDOT's in the process of, and like, is it gonna be like a pull-off stop, or the bus isn't gonna stop on the whole travel lane? Because I noticed on Allentown Road, I know there's a couple pull-offs there where the bus is, like the 105 in general, where the bus can pull off to the side and passengers can get off safely without, the fear of getting rear-ended or causing an accident. Is that what?
So the question is whether there will be pull-offs on MacArthur. Currently, no, it is in the travel lane, which is similar to the way the buses currently stop at Mickley. We did make sure to position them in places where the traffic is less, so it's north of Grape Street, where there is less traffic. We've also heard some feedback from operators that those pullouts on 105 on 412, sorry, State Route 412, Bus Route 105 toward Hellertown, they often have some sightline issues with buses pulling back out. So it's a constant back and forth with PennDOT, with traffic safety. But we are finding that the placement of the stops currently in the traffic lane are in the low impact areas with the large buses should be safe, but we do recognize that we want to improve that safety as much as possible moving forward.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions on the Whitehall area before we move to the other 3 service areas? Yep. No, so the question was, will the 403 have the same route to the Lehigh Valley Mall as the 603? The answer is no. The other routes go to Lehigh Valley Mall. So 403 will connect to Allentown Transit Center or connect you to the new 211 connection there at 14th and Allen. That's part of why the 211 goes down to Allen Street to cover that. But no, it is not planned to go to the mall, and that is part of the consequences of not having an end of line at the mall. So we looked at ways we could continue it somewhere else, but instead we found that it was more beneficial to certain rider groups to have the increased service on those direct routes and maintain the 403 as a connection to ATC to connect other places. Yeah.
It's the 103.
In what way? So the question is the 103 kind of being morphed into what the 219 used to do? I mean, everything, the service patterns are kind of the same. It's not like we looked at the old 219 and said, let's rebuild the 103 there. But we know that 219 used to exist connecting the Egypt area to the race area. And so that is an important service pattern. So the answer is kind of no, it's not intended to be directly the 219. But that is a common travel pattern in the area. So that's why it is similar. We don't currently have plans to extend it from Cherryville over to Egypt. That's partially because of a bridge closure on the Lehigh River. That is something that we're looking at potentially considering in the future when that bridge opens and see if there's demand for that in the future. Any other questions on the Whitehall, Allentown area? All right, we can always come back at the end. I'll stay for comments as long as you need after. But we're going to move over to West Valley service adjustments. And again, we'll show the area map, go over each of the routes individually, and then go back to this to answer any questions. So this is mostly in response to access to jobs in the Briningsville area, Trexlertown, Fogelsville area. A lot of what we heard is we needed increased service along Tillman, increased service along the 218 from Allentown out to Fogelsville, and increased service along Hamilton Boulevard, specifically to go between the areas where the blue line stops are limited. So that's kind of the origin of it. We also are returning fixed route service to the Allentown Comprehensive Treatment Center, which will appear on schedules as Low Hill Township. That used to be a destination on Route 218. Those riders have shifted to flex service the last couple of years, but now we're able to add it back to the 613 service, and we're really excited about that because we're still seeing daily ridership up there. And then I mentioned, improved frequencies on Hamilton Boulevard and more direct service to the Lehigh Valley Hospital from Allentown. So those are the main key areas we were addressing. You might have noticed on the South Allentown map, the 104 is no longer going to Cedar Crest Hospital. The 104 currently goes all the way down to Weiss-Emmaus and then goes up Cedar Crest Boulevard to Cedar Crest Hospital. That was a connection that people requested, but it hasn't really been used much and wasn't as productive. And we found that people working and going to Lehigh Valley Hospital wanted to get to downtown faster. So we're taking that back to where it was a couple years ago, ending down at Weiss-Emmaus. And the route entirely north of that is the same schedule, same everything. So to replace that service, I mentioned the 102 is also kind of going back to where it was. So everything east of Cedar Point, the Weiss at Cedar Crest Boulevard is exactly the same. The schedule is the same. It's just west of Crest Plaza. We're going back to jumping on 78, going down to Professional Park and ending at Cedar Crest Hospital. This does a couple things. It removes the loop. So we had people that rode from Cedar Crest Hospital to Cedar Point Weiss and then had to transfer. We found that a lot of people really needed, the direct bus without that transfer. And then we also had capacity issues at Dorney Park that were caused by this. So those capacity issues are being addressed by the Blue Line and 102 serving that. So again, the schedule is the same. We did add some trips on Sundays and Saturdays. So weekdays, exactly the same schedule. After 6 p.m. on Saturdays, it's slightly less frequent. Same span, but it's every 90 minutes at night and every 60 minutes during the day. And that is so that the Saturday and Sunday schedules can be the same. So we added some trips on Sunday so that there's that late night service and early morning service on Union Boulevard and to the hospital. 322, I mentioned more frequency on Hamilton Boulevard. A couple of changes here. One major change is it no longer goes to the Allentown Transportation Center. Instead, it ends at Cedar Point Weiss. So you have to transfer to the Blue Line or transfer to the 102. That is done because there wasn't as much ridership in the city. A lot of people were transferring or going somewhere else. But also this allows us to increase the frequency on the rest of Hamilton Boulevard once you're out there. So you can get back and forth between the shops a little more. We've added Cedar Village senior apartments to this route, as well as the Westcottsville Park and Ride, which were both previously on the 102. We also are not serving Boulder Drive with this. There were some issues with truck traffic in the area causing a slightly danger for some operators, and it was a difficult turn. We also spoke with employers at FedEx and Amazon and discovered that the employee entrances are actually closer to Grimm. So a lot of people who are leaving and going to the bus route on Boulder, it's actually a shorter walk to the bus stop that's right down here at Mosser and Grimm. So for those who aren't aware, there is a bus stop over there and you can walk through the employee parking lot to that. But again, I would mention with this change, if you're finding a lack of access to your job, please have your HR manager contact us and see what we can do. But it's a much more simplified route going from Briningsville to Cedar Point. The Briningsville on the line is the end of Nestle. Schedule again, 4:15 in the morning until, there's that bar again. Okay, no service on Sundays. 4:15 in the morning until 9 p.m. every 100 minutes. So just over hourly, but that's a significant increase from the over 3 hours we have now. And then similar span, select trips on Saturdays, really based around employer needs on Nestle Boulevard. So again, have your employer reach out if you need some additional service there. That's the proposed schedule for 322. Again, we mentioned 218, similar to the 322. In order to increase frequency, we had to remove the loop from the end of the 218. So 218 goes from ATC to Fogelsville Weiss up there on Nursery and where you can connect with the 613. So the loop is no longer there going through Nestle. You'll have to transfer to the 613, but we were able to increase the frequency. So even though you have a transfer, you'll have more access to get home and to work out there. And if you haven't been up to that Fogelsville Weiss area, there's a couple new bus shelters up there. There's lots of fast food and a grocery store that you can go to on any transfers. And we found a lot of comments that people enjoyed transferring there. So again, increase in frequency, it's 5:20 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., 6 o'clock on weekdays and Saturdays. It's every 60 minutes, every hour during the week. And then on Saturdays, it's every hour during the day and then every 90 minutes at night to add some more late night trips to make sure we're still getting home at the end of the day for that. 613, same general route through the Briningsville area. A couple of changes. It no longer at the southern end goes from Truxtun Plaza down to the backside of Walmart. Instead, it just goes straight on Hamilton Boulevard. We found people weren't really using that back area and buses were getting caught in traffic. Still, this route I mentioned goes to Boulder Drive for anyone still living there, and Industrial. Maintains all the same route up to Fogelsville Weiss, and then select trips 7 days a week will continue beyond to Low Hill Township here up to the Allentown Comprehensive Treatment Center. One thing to note here, 613 to Commercial Center. That is again a rename of the old Truxtun Transit Center. So same place, right there by Movie Tavern, right there by Air Products. It's just called Commercial Center instead of Truxtun Transit Center now. It's still the same destination there. And schedule on that 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. every 45 minutes on weekdays, every 60 minutes on Saturdays and Sundays, a slightly smaller span on Sundays, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So still a frequent route, and you'll see on the schedule here, these couple trips in the morning. So in the morning, 2 trips will go up to the Allentown Comprehensive Treatment Center in Lowell Township. There's a bus back 10 minutes later, and then there's a bus back 45 minutes later. So for anyone who needs to stay a little longer, there will be a bus 45 minutes later. And then there's a second set of trips around the noontime area. We've spoken to the treatment center, and this aligns with their schedule. They're prepared for that. These early trips will operate 7 days a week. These later trips only operate on weekdays, but I mentioned it's just Low Hill Township on weekdays. The rest of the service operates 7 days a week between Vogelsville and Commercial Center. So that concludes the West Valley service adjustments. You can kind of look at the map and see how that all connects together again. A lot of that is about a simplification of service, making it easier to understand, but also to improve some of those frequencies connecting the areas. So are there any questions on West Valley before we move on to the last 2 service areas?
The only thing going to the hospital, then would be the 102.
Correct. Yep. All right. Any other questions on West Valley service area? Okay. We'll move on to Fountain Hill, Bethlehem. This is a much more simple discussion. Routes affected here are 103, 108, 323, 327, and 601. A lot of those changes are very minor. They're mostly related to on-time performance issues, but we know we needed more service to Fountain Hill. So again, we added that new 101 service with increased frequency up Broadway. And then we're also changing the tail of the 108 in Fountain Hill to follow the old 327 alignment and ending the 327 at Bethlehem Transportation Center. So we'll go over that route by route here really quickly. Again, you already saw this before, exact same thing you saw before. It's the south side to south side route, the new route 101, going from Spillman Loop to Parkway Shopping Center. Again, same thing every 45 minutes, early in the morning to late at night, and every 60 minutes at night, and on Saturdays and Sundays. The 108 alignment, there are no schedule changes or alignment changes north of 4th Street and South Side. So everything BTC up to East Boulevard, Stefco Boulevard, no changes at all for that. Same schedule. The only change is that because it's going up to the top of the hill, it does leave Fountain Hill Hospital early. So it leaves the hospital 2 minutes earlier and then goes up the top of the hill back down. So same schedule, same as the current schedule, just leaving the hospital slightly earlier. Then the 327 is just being cut back to Bethlehem Transportation Center. Same schedule north, all the way up to Bethlehem Square, same alignment, same everything. This is really an on-time performance adjustment. That bus route was running very late on certain days. And so this does force a transfer for anyone going from Center Street to Fountain Hill, but at least that bus will be on time. And we're hoping to position that bus for growth in the future. But right now, that tail got switched to the 108 if you're trying to get to Fountain Hill. So again, same schedule, exact same schedule as currently. 323, very, very, very small change. There's no schedule change. It's still going to Center Valley and Corporate Parkway and Promenade Shops. We received some confusion and complaints about the end of line layover. So right now the bus turns down on 4th Street and ends at Broadhead, and then the southbound trip goes down 4th Street back to Center Valley. Instead, the start and end will shift to Southside Station. That does a couple things. That prevents the buses from running early on 3rd Street, which is a problem. We do receive some complaints pretty regularly that riders are missing that bus because it does run early. So this provides a layover location for buses. If you haven't been to Southside Station, there's now an awning there. We are allowed to park 3 buses there, so buses can lay over there and wait till they're scheduled to leave. Drivers can use a restroom at Starbucks, and you can be prepared there. And for the public, there's a real-time sign there that helps you wait for your bus there. So that's why we're just shifting that into line over. But again, the schedule is exactly the same. It's just you'll see that destination sign change. So when you're on 4th Street now, it says Center Valley. Now it'll say Southside Station, and if you're on 3rd Street, it'll say Center Valley. And then similar, Route 601, it's just a minor stop change, exact same schedule. 601, this is our red line free fare service. For those of you not aware, it is fare free. It's just a circulator in downtown Bethlehem that runs weekdays right out here. Fare free, sponsored by the Bethlehem Parking Authority, so we appreciate that. The only change here is the stop up here on North and Main Street is moving around the corner. It's because when buses turn that corner on North Street, it's hard for a bus to pull over the curb. So it's moving to the Moravian shuttle stop around the corner. But very simple change there. And that concludes Fountain Hill Bethlehem. Much more simple than the other areas, but are there any questions on the changes in Fountain Hill Bethlehem? Yep.
Well, I just wanted to say something about the South Side Station. There's a lot of vehicles that park there. I don't know if you guys can anything about that or.
Oh, yes,
Have
Bethlehem
seen-
Parking Authority is aware. I mean, they're sponsoring a lot of this and they're aware of those vehicles. So if any of the public is listening that is parking those vehicles, the Bethlehem Parking Authority is aware. But yes, agree. And the more we lay over our buses there, I think the more the general public will understand that buses are supposed to be there. But yes. Yes.
As I stated, with me living in the Fountain Hill area, if I wanted to catch the bus at the Wawa, how would I get to Levi Mall then? Or to the beach, get over to some of my doctor's appointments.
So for the public online, I just want to address that last question that I just answered was about traffic laying over or traffic parking at Southside Station. That's what that question was about. The question that was just asked about getting from Fountain Hill to Lehigh Valley Mall. There are a couple options. You can take the new 101 to ATC or to Southside Station, where you can connect to the Green Line to go to Lehigh Valley Mall. But both of those are increased frequencies and increased span. So either way, we'll get there. Any other questions about Fountain Hill, Bethlehem? All right, last service area is Easton area. Easton area, the routes affected are 106, 214, 216, 217, 312, pretty much everything except for 606 and South Side, Blue Line, and 220. A lot of these are related to, again, we mentioned at the very top, we've seen an increase in ridership in Easton. We've seen some capacity issues at EITC, and we've heard some complaints about the current 106 alignment getting to Northampton crossings, and also span of service up to Nazareth. So that's what we're really trying to address here. Some of the things you'll notice are those alignment changes in Nazareth, increased service to College Hill, more connections at Northampton Crossing, more direct service up to Amazon and the warehouse areas on Van Buren, and then more frequent and direct service between William Penn Park and Ride, Emmerich Boulevard, and all of these areas. So we'll go through each one by one and then go back to that map again. 106 is really the showpiece here. We've increased service on 106 quite a bit. We've increased the number of buses on the route in order to provide more layover for operators. The route is simplified in the northern end. So for the majority of the day, it will operate from Forks Plaza in Forks, north of College Hill, through EITC, through West Ward, up to Northampton Crossing directly on Easton Nazareth Pike, and then directly up Van Buren to lay over at the Van Buren Loop. Similar to the previous comment, there are some issues with traffic parking on Van Buren. Palmer Township is aware of that and are dealing with parking up there too. But that we are seeing a lot of growth on Van Buren, and that is really, really going to be a showpiece in the future. But it also provides more direct service. Some key notes: you'll still have access to, I mentioned Amazon at the north, more direct access to Northampton Crossing. Every trip now goes back to Palmer Park Mall instead of Sunday only service there. So every trip goes to Palmer Park Mall. And then down in the Wilson area from Easton Hospital, it goes up to Northampton Street and down Wood Street to connect with some shopping areas that needed more service there, and also connection to the 216. At Easton Hospital, there is a connection to the Blue Line if you're trying to go to 25th Street or West Ward. This also addresses some concerns with the Hill at Easton Hospital. So now there's stops on Lehigh and Washington at 21st Street at the top of the hill. And then you've got a one-seat ride from the Northampton complex through downtown Easton up to College Hill. For anybody who has been in the Easton area in the last year, you will know that there is a lot of construction that causes crazy detours every week, and it's always changing. So that is very frustrating. I would like to say that construction is ending soon, but it's not. There's a giant new complex starting construction right now. And so we've worked a lot with the Public Works Director and a lot of the affiliations in Easton area to figure out what the best location is. So 214 and 106 are now on 3rd Street. They're no longer doing that loop to 4th and 2nd Street. Those stops were being missed all the time by this construction. So now I have direct service on 3rd Street. And then this service on 106 takes Ferry Street instead of Northampton, which avoids that very long light at 6th and Northampton gets people to EATC faster, provides more direct service, and helps navigate a lot of this construction a lot better. So if you're going to Northampton Street, 5 Points area, you still have the blue line going there, but this kind of streamlines service through downtown and makes, one central focal point there to really help navigate a lot of that construction and get buses through there faster. So I mentioned earlier, all the way Van Buren to College Hill is scheduled to operate hourly. And then opposite that, there is a shorter bus that goes from College Hill just to Easton Hospital and back. And between those two, bus service from Easton Hospital, College Hill will operate every 30 minutes. So I'll go to that schedule really quick. So 5:30 a.m. to 10:30 at night. It's every 60 minutes, weekdays and Saturdays. On weekdays, during morning and afternoon until about 6 p.m., it's every 30 minutes. And on Sundays, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is every hour on that whole route. So that really operates as a new connector route. We added a bus to that to provide some additional layover for operators. So that bus should be more on time than the current 106 and really helps connect all of those areas of growth in the Easton area. So feeding into that, we have a couple alignment adjustments to the other 3 routes out there. Route 217, everything north of Forks Weiss is the same up to Slate Belt. We're finding that is working for the span and less frequency up there that Slate Belt needs, but there's an increase in service from Forks Weiss down to William Penn Park and Ride. So this is really acting as a connector from 214 at Forks Weiss, going through Tatamy, through the industrial area to Van Buren. That's like trolley line, Van Buren, Northampton Crossing, connecting to the hospital that was previously on Route 106, and then jumping on 33 during non-peak hours to go to William Penn Park and Ride, where you can connect with the blue line. So this will help a lot of people who live further out from the Easton area to connect to a route, get down to Emmerich Boulevard faster, get to some of those destinations faster. And this service from William Penn Park and Ride up to Forks Weiss will operate more frequently than the service up to Slate Belt. So just kind of look at that schedule. The 217 between William Penn and Forks Weiss is really 5:30 in the morning to 8:30 at night, every 90 minutes for the majority of the day, and then every 3 hours at that last trip, just to provide that last trip late at night to get people home. 217 to Rosetto is select trips. It's 3 trips a day that are currently going up there early in the morning, around lunchtime, and the afternoon. So no changes up in Slate Belt. It's just an increase in frequency to William Penn Park and Ride down in the Easton area. 214, much more simplified, scaled back quite a bit. We mentioned that the 106 is going to College Hill and Forks Weiss a lot more. So the 214 is seeing a reduction in service. So it only is directly from EITC to Forks Weiss and is really functioning as a connector to that Weiss, to the 217 to connect to the rest of the area, as well as to Mesker campus for Lafayette College. This is scheduled with much more limited service every 3 hours, 6 a.m. to 9:45 p.m.
Okay.
But again, I mentioned that if these changes are causing an issue with you getting to work, please have your HR manager contact us. This is one of those areas where there's potentially room to add service if we have an agreement with an employer. So just mention that there, much more simplified route on the 214. But again, in College Hill and Forks, you have that 106 providing a lot of the service there. And then 216, this is really addressing a loss of access from a bridge closure that forced the 312 to be removed from Nazareth. In addition, we've heard from Nazareth residents that there was a need for an increased span. The current bus, the last bus of the day, goes there at 3 p.m. And so we want to increase the span. We also heard that the loops in Nazareth aren't really working. So the bus now goes both directions through Nazareth, past Graysdale. And you'll see that here. So the end of line is Nazareth Plaza, goes back to Graysdale and back down to Northampton Crossing. Just like it currently is, goes to Palmer Park Mall and follows most of the same alignment back to EITC, except the loop that goes down Greenwood no longer goes to Freemansburg and instead goes to William Penn Highway. This is in response to a lot of the public asking for local stops along that street near Easton High School. And so same stops that were there before on the previous 101 are now being served by that 216. And then it is a more limited schedule, but it increases that span. So it's every 3 hours, but 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 at night. This addresses that span need for Nazareth, but then everything from Northampton Crossing to Easton is more frequent because of those 106 improvements. So that kind of concludes the Easton area. And it all on a map again. It's again simplified, trying to address some of those needs. Are there any questions on what's being presented here? Yeah. The question was, what's happening to 312? 312 is remaining the current schedule. So we had to remove service from Nazareth and take it to Bethlehem Square. We're keeping that the same. So it will stay its current schedule to Bethlehem Square and to Northampton Community College. Any other questions?
Yeah, went online.
Yep.
They said just confirming that the 217 is still making 5 runs weekday to Saturday.
So the question was confirming that 217 is still making 5 runs weekday to Saturday. It is still weekday and Saturday service. It is only 3 trips to Slate Belt. Early morning, midday, and evening, but it is 5 to 6 days a week, Monday to Saturday. Okay. Any other questions on the Easton area service? Yes.
So both the 216 and the 106 are going to go straight into the Palmer Park Mall, right?
The question was the 216 and 106, will they both go into Palmer Mall? Yes, the answer is correct.
I know-
Every trip, both of them, every trip now.
Okay, because I in the past, I've had people ask me, because I work at the transit center there in downtown Easton, and I've had people ask me, how I can get to, which bus is more feasible to get to Palmer Park Mall, because I know for the 106 right now, you can't, it goes right by the mall, but
Except for Sundays, yeah. It was confusing now. So both 106 and 216, every trip goes to Palmer Park Mall. The 106 will be slightly faster because it won't be doing that Greenwood loop. But every trip will go there.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions on Easton area?
So what time? Or Palmer?
Palmer Park Mall. It's between the 2 routes. So the question was, how late can you get to Palmer Park Mall? So the last outbound 216, we've got 7:49, but I should have just gone straight to the 106. We've got 8:20 is the last one out to Palmer Park Mall. All right. Any other questions on Easton area? I think we've made it. Thank you all for your patience. So here's the complete system map of everything we just talked about. This is again in the presentation that is posted on the website. This presentation will be on the website. Again, I've mentioned this a few times. If any of these changes are affecting your access to jobs, please have your HR manager contact LANTA through Writer Resources or through the survey comments that you're all responding with. And just mention that they're an HR manager for a company, and we'll reach out directly to them and have a conversation to see if we can accommodate anything there. And then for everyone, comments, and this is everyone. We've got some drivers in the room, some operators. Thank your drivers. Please thank your drivers. Everyone comments we've got next 4 weeks. So send your comments to survey comments, but per that Your Voice initiative, we'll accept comments. However, we can stay here later and take comments through Monday, April 14th. And that's when we'll be finalizing the service changes based on the feedback we receive here. So again, I mentioned that with the Whitehall survey, we really value feedback. So please send comments. And that concludes the presentation tonight. So we'll stay after for any questions or comments here. Daryl, is there anything that needs to be addressed online?
There's one guy who's had his hand up for a while. Hold on, you got another question? Okay, it's not really a question. So there's a comment box on the website. It's live now. So if you have any type of feedback of anything that he did, I realize they can't hear me.
Yeah. I was gonna repeat it.
So there is a survey box on the webpage for these service changes that if you have any type of feedback, you would just submit it via there. You can also do what's on the screen as well from via survey comments at lantabus.com. We're just trying to provide as many ways to provide any type of feedback that you can before changes are finalized. So yeah, but we'll still be here to answer any questions. I see there is someone online that has had their hand up for like an hour. So I tried to unmute you, but it is not working. So that's why I was trying to message you to type your answer, type your question into the Q&A so we could address it. So, or you could use survey comments, or you could go to the website, whichever is your preference. So.
Thank you, Daryl. And again, we'll say after for any personal comments if you want to come up and chat with me after. But are there any other comments or questions before we close out the public meeting part? No?
I just went to survey comments at thebus.com and it says the survey is now closed. Second thing is,
But I'm sorry.
sorry, what?
Survey comments is an email address, so I'm a little confused.
It's not a website. No, it's an email. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're governed by limited budget, limited fleet, limited drivers, and we have a large service area that we have to serve. I agree, as a rider, I would love to see a lot more service, but we have to make sure we always have to choose frequency versus coverage. And in order with our current resources to provide frequency in some areas, we would have to remove service entirely from other areas. So it's a balance that we're dealing with right now, but I agree. I would love to see increased frequency, and we're addressing that where possible.
your budget is provided by the state or the county or the city or
The questions about budget, it's provided by a mix of sources, and we can definitely chat after about those mix of sources. There's capital and operating budget that goes into this. So they come from different sources. And you know, I mentioned revenue support as well. We also have some support from employers, some support from I mentioned Bethlehem Parking Authority supporting a bus right up front here. So anywhere, if you see a need, if there is somebody that wants to help offer with that mix, we're definitely open to talking. Yeah, it's a mix of sources. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Yep.
Can there be any question about anything?
Sure. Just a reminder, like, you know, this is for the public meeting. I can definitely talk after if there's a, you know, unrelated to the service changes question, we can talk, but if there's questions about service change, yeah.
Oh, a service change.
Yeah. We can talk after for sure, but just for everyone who's waiting online, you know,
Gotcha.
any other questions or comments about service change, we'll definitely chat after this. No worries. All right. Daryl, should we close out the meeting? Or another comment online?
There's slate belt service. Is there any alternatives? Can flex service be extended to Weiss?
That is a great comment that we will add. So the question is, can there be an increase in any increase in service to slate belt, potentially increasing access from the flex service to Weiss? It's definitely something we can look into because the 502 flex service remains there. And with the decrease in service on the 214, that's definitely a possibility. So thank you for that comment. We'll add it to our list and see if we can address that.
And they just asked where will these be posted?
So after the 4-week period, so the current proposals are posted online right now on the same page that had the survey link. This slide presentation is there, the comment box is there, and we will be posting the video of this meeting there early next week. Then you've got those 4 weeks to provide comments and feedback. The final survey or the final planned changes will be posted around the end of April to the website, likely to a different page. We usually at the top show, you know, feedback and then another page showing planned service changes. So you'll see June planned service changes on our website, and we'll post that on our banner when they're available, end of April. Yep.
I actually have two more questions. Are your bus routes are still available on an app on the phone so you can see where the buses are?
Yes. So the question is, are the buses still available in an app on the phone? Ooh, there's a lot of slides we went through. So we do still have apps on the phone. Yeah, here. So Google Apps, Transit app is over on the right here. The apps are third party, right? So Transit app is not a LANTA app. Google Maps is not LANTA, but the data is LANTA. So that data is still online. There's additional apps out there. I know Apple Maps has some stuff. There's like, there are other third party apps that you can use. We prefer to promote Transit app because we find it the most easy to use, but you can choose whatever app. So that will remain for all routes available online. Yes.
And do any of the LANTA employees besides the bus drivers ride the bus?
The question is, do any LANTA employees beside the bus driver ride the bus? The answer is a lot. Yeah, we got one here. He's not a driver. I don't even own a car. I ride the bus every day. Some of our board members ride the bus every day. Yeah, a lot of LANTA employees do ride the bus.
As a driver, it's not convenient for the drivers to ride transit to get to work.
Right.
Because, you know, when you start real early, there's no buses that are going, you know, so in that aspect, it doesn't make sense for us as drivers.
And not only that, because I work downtown at the Easton Transit Center, and I just take the bus there because of parking. You know, plus, you know, and plus wear and tear in the car, and it all adds up.
All right. So I definitely think there's some good conversations happening. We'll stay and have conversations in the room for everyone online. Any other questions online? I think we should close out the public meeting part, and we'll stay and have these chats for sure. Yeah.
Gonna go with it. The fare change.
All right. Thanks for that segue. Daryl, do you want to come up here and talk about when and where people can
wasn't
find
going
out
to,
about
but-
the fares? We weren't addressing it at this meeting. There will be
Yeah, I'm
other
sure.
meetings to address that.
Sure, yeah.
So the question was regarding fare change and just fares in general. I assume you're relating to like the Valley Ride or like the fare structure.
Put a Hail Mary on this. I wasn't going, but just, yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to the fare structure and the fare changes, the fare structure will be changing. We haven't had a defined date on when the fare structure will actually happen. That's why there's like limited information in terms of, oh, well, this is going to be that date, because we don't want to propose any type of confusion information like, oh, I'm supposed to do this date, until we get more logistics with that. So, but there will be more changes. I'm still here. You guys can come and ask me any type of questions that you may or may not have. And we can go from there. But at this time, there's nothing really. We don't have a fine-tuned date for what's gonna happen and when it's gonna happen.
And we've heard some dates floating around. If you hear a date, ignore it. That's rumor.
No, I wasn't going to, because
Yeah.
I sort of asked about my needs, but I just help, just
Mhm.
throw a Hail Mary on that question. I'm like, just try to. Happens.
No worries.
Does that mean we're Valley Rise?
I didn't say that. At this time, no, there are no plans in the immediate future to go cashless right now.
As they both stated, that's something that Clubhouse and Lehigh County people
Mhm.
on the disability and the social security disability thing with their limited income, they're curious about that because some of them take your advanced show services. They want to know, are there any increases that they should be aware of so they can save for in advance?
Okay.
And should they pay attention to your site, the LANTA site, or have a representative from Clubhouse contact you guys through the proper channels to get the proper answers when the time comes?
Well, always do that. That's always as far as if any type of organization that needs any type of clarity, as opposed to hearing it third party, because a lot of times, sometimes you get misinformation. So we'll publish all the information, but if we reach out to the organizations that we know well, but any type of information that people want regarding any type of changes, they could always reach out to us directly. As far as did want to clarify that the changes to the fares in which I was talking about with Valley Ride have nothing to do with LANTA Van. LANTA Van is a completely separate structure. It has not fixed route. LANTA Bus and LANTA Flex have nothing to do with LANTA Van in terms of the way payments are done or anything like that. So I did want to make that clear.
Let Mr. Ronald NASE at Clubhouse, the new manager there, know about that and have him reach out to you guys in regards to that.
Yeah, I'll give you my card
Next week.
if you need be. Any other questions regarding the changes?
Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming out on a Friday night. Please also provide feedback on the meeting time. You know, this was an adjustment based on feedback we received last time. I'm glad to see more faces in the room. Again, we value your feedback. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being online. We're gonna see you off. I know you got buses to catch. But again, this will be posted online. We want to hear your comments. Thanks again, everybody, for coming out.
Banana.